Hi guys, and welcome to the digital studio. My name is Ellen. Today we're going to do a 20-minute pigeon sequence to really flush through our kidneys down in our first floor of our house, so our pelvis. We're going to do a lot of cross-referencing using our imagination to kind of expand and open up the volume of our pelvis by the virtue of our intellect or our minds. What you'll need, if you have it at home, is 1 or 2 blankets, anything that's going to hold and kind of support your pelvis. A nice thing I always like to use is sandbags, so if you've got anything like rice, unopened packets of rice or sandbags at home, you can always use those when we come into the poses. But also maybe 1 or 2 or 3 blocks, depending on what you have at home, or large thick books could be used, or a bolster or pillows of some sort, just to support and to help the structuring when we come into one of those kind of deep, nourishing poses to really flush out through our kidneys. What we're going to be doing is a lot of breath work throughout the poses and working through flushing our lungs and filling up our lungs so that our kidneys can start to flush. So when you're ready, just come onto all fours for a moment, and we'll just set up the conditions of the container. So if you find your wrists underneath your shoulders, your knees underneath your hips, you might measure out shoulder width distance and right angles in your joints so that you're in the middle of your shoulder girdle and your hip sockets. And we're just going to move through some slow cat-cows. So as you inhale, just dome the upper back, round through the spine and plug down through the tops of your feet. As you exhale, start to spread the sitting bones, spread the collarbones and travel it through. Inhale, rounding, and then exhale, travel. And then once you start to find the breath with the movement, don't be afraid to really start to speed it up, create a little bit of heat, a little bit of agitation, so that we can really find the malleability of our bones and our joints. So it's in and out through the nose, and just start pumping the breath so we can create some heat, so we can reform the structure. In, out, in, out, in, out. And rather than thinking about moving your spine or your neck, I want you to think about flushing through your shoulder joints, your hip sockets, plugging down through the center of your palms, the center of your kneecaps, the tops of your ankle joints, the tops of your feet, and the pinky toes of each foot. So nice. Keep going. Agitate it a little bit more. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Take a big inhale and round the spine. Hold the breath at the top, really plug down through all 10 knuckles, all 10 toes, and then exhale to neutral. Look forward, pull the crown of the head forward as if it was that piece of string, so you can really organize yourself in the middle of your joint space, and just start flipping the wrists forward and back. And rather than just turning your wrist joint and your hand around, really pick up the whole arm bone so you're swiveling the arm bone in its socket. And then once you've had it with that, we'll meet with our fingertips facing back, heels of the hands pointing forward. Now, if this is quite intense and it's not feasible for you, you can always bring the knees closer towards the fingertips. Or again, you might like to grab a blanket and just elevate the wrists so that there's less pressure on the wrists there. And then once you've found the plug of the heels of the hands into the earth, just start moving through your cat-cows again. So inhale, rounding, exhale, opening collarbones. In, out, in, out, in, out. Keep going with the breath, start pumping it a little bit quicker. It doesn't have to be forceful or out of the nose, just as long as you're pumping the breath through, as if you were circulating and filtering the breath through the circuitry of your joints. We want to create the flush of blood, the flush of breath, the heat to be able to move through so we can find some buoyancy, find some fluency with these joints. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. A big inhale and round the spine. Hold the breath full. And then exhale to neutral. Just gently unflip those wrists. Now that we've kind of opened up the space of the collarbones, you might grab your blankets, just prep them ready near you. The more support when we come into pigeon, the less likely we're going to dump into our pelvis. So when we come into a dog, so we'll come back to our hands and knees. Look forward as you tuck the back toes, press to the balls of the feet, send your hips up, downward facing dog. You might like to pedal out through the heels here. So good, and then come up onto the balls of the feet, bend your knees and plug your lungs onto your thighs so that you've got a fold at your hip crease. And as you keep looking forward, pick up your right knee, maybe come up onto the fingertips, thread your right knee all the way over to the right side of the mat. Now here you want to plug the whole pelvis down onto the blanket, onto a throne. So if you still have a few gaps underneath there, grab another blanket or a pillow, whatever you've got, so that you've got nice structuring to hold the support of your pelvis. That one's a little bit too high for me, but you want to be able to plug your perineum down into the earth. Here, just stack the shoulders above the hip crease for a moment. If your back foot is out to the side, just tuck the back toes and organize that left ankle joint behind the left hip. Take a deep breath in as you curve from the back toes all the way up to the crown of the head like a big crescent moon. Open up the lungs as they travel forward. And maybe open up the mouth. Before we fold down, close down the eyes and travel your brain down into your pelvis. Imagine that we're going to put the pelvis on a clock, so your pubic bone is pointing towards 12 o'clock and your tailbone is pointing down towards 6. Your right hip is pulling back towards 3 o'clock and your left hip is pulling forward towards 9. Here, if you've got the blocks or a bolster to support you, these are going to come up towards the front. I'm going to start to fold down, so a nice option to flush out your lymph nodes underneath your armpits is that 2 blocks come underneath your armpits as if they were traveling forward to a capital A. You want to plug in your armpits rather than rounding the spine coming down. Pubis, navel, sternum travels forward. Hinge at your hips and plug down through the armpits here. The third block, either on the highest or the middle setting, is going to come underneath the forehead, and the fingertips come out in Hasta Bandha into a big wide V. And here, if you've got those sandbags or someone nice that's able to put a sandbag on top of your pelvis, that's also really nice across your sacrum, and another one across your shoulder blades. And so we're going to do a little bit of cross-referencing with the imagination and filter the breath through as we find the center of our circumference. So travel the brain back down into the pelvis. Tilt that pubic bone forward. Feel the subtle spreading of your sitting bones behind the natural curvature in your lower back. Your belly button and your sternum travel forward, and you'll notice a subtle back bend in your upper back. And just as we thought before, from the crown of the head, pull that piece of string out towards in front of you. And then staying down in the pelvis, from your left hip, draw a line through your pelvis to your right sitting bone. From the front of your right hip, draw a line through to the left sitting bone and start to pull those 4 points apart. Right where X marks the spot, your perineum, right in the middle of your pelvis. Start to inhale and send that breath as if you were blowing up a dense, deflated balloon in the middle of your pelvis. Feeling the hip bones and the sitting bones expand out to each side. And you might come back to that imagery of the pelvis on your clock, pulling that right hip back, the left hip forward. So we're organizing ourselves in time and space. So nice. Take a few more moments here. And then once you've had it with that coming up onto the fingertips, just remove the two blocks if there's any underneath your armpits. And start to walk the hands over towards the left-hand side of your mat, so out towards 10 o'clock. Be mindful that the right hip doesn't travel with you. Keep pulling it back towards 3. Option 1, you might stay here, pulling the collarbones apart and really opening up the space of your lungs. Option 2, you'll come in for a twist. So your right elbow is going to travel over towards the left side and right shoulder comes down towards the earth. And then the right temple comes onto that block or a blanket or a pillow, and make a fist with your right hand and a mitt with your top palm and start to spin out towards the left. The vision travels up and over that left shoulder. And start to wring out this spine, fill up that left lung, and you drain the opposite kidney, your right kidney. Strength, structure, and stability. Down in the first floor of our house, our foundations. Our kidneys are our personal waters. The plumbing system down in the basement. So nice. After you've had it with that side, start to walk the fingertips over towards the right. So option 1, staying here. Option 2, left elbow comes down, left shoulder and the left temple. Be mindful not to move the block. Keep it in the center so the integrity of your spine stays in the middle. Make a fist with the left, a mitt with the top palm. Start to press and leverage that right spin out towards the right. Keeping the hips at 3 and 9, the spin comes around the torso. And this time filling up that right lung and flushing that left kidney. And then with every spin, with every revolution, find the revelation in the upper back. So your back bend as you find the pubis, your belly button, your sternum travel forward and up. There's a subtle back bend in your upper back. So good. Bring it back into the center. Stack the shoulders up above the hip crease for a moment and find the collarbones pull out to each side. And then when you're ready, roll over onto that right hip and thread that left leg out in front for double pigeon. So here with double pigeon, option 1 is that the right ankle will stack underneath the left knee and the left ankle will be either out in front of that right knee or up on top. And here, if that left knee kind of jacks up, that's fine. Once we find our pelvis and our hip sockets, that eventually will come down. Just don't block it off, because once we start to fold down, the knee will naturally come down. When we sit back on our sitting bones and round our spine, that's when the knee will kind of pop up. So to find the middle of our pelvis again, tilt that pubic bone forward, spread the sitting bones and plug down through the middle of your perineum. And then grab a hold of opposite elbows. We're going to inhale, lift the elbows up above the frame, fill up these lungs. Exhale, fold them down. So we're just going to move through a bit of pranayama here. Inhale, raise it up. Exhale, fold it down. Option 1, you'll stay here with this slow breath, just moving as you open and close your windows on the second floor. Option 2, just start to speed it up a bit and filter through the breath through the windows on the second floor of your house. In, out, in, out. So as you lift the elbows up, you take an inhale, and as you close them down, you exhale through the nose. Every time we open up the window, we're pushing our lungs forward, so fill them up to their full potential. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. A big inhale at the top. And this time from your hips, we're going to start to exhale, travel around the front, like a big arc, and inhale, travel up through the center. Keep your elbows up in line with the crown of your head. So the movement might be subtle like this, keeping the integrity of the spine, and eventually we'll be able to fold more, but still maintaining that back bend in the upper back. So good. Do one more here. Bring it back into the center and just release those palms down onto 2 blocks. I'd like to come up onto the highest setting with the blocks so that you can really find your lungs move forward. So as you start to hinge at your hips, rather than rounding the spine and losing the lower back, feel that pubic bone still travel forward, the belly button and the sternum travel forward out in front of you. Maybe even coming up onto the fingertips here on those blocks. Close down the eyes, tilt that pubic bone forward, and find the cross reference of your left hip to that right sitting bone, and the right hip to your left sitting bone, and pull those 4 points apart. Plug down through your left sitting bone and start to walk the hands out towards the right. Option 1, you'll stay here, folding over this right hip, keeping the integrity of that back bend in the upper back. Option 2, you'll find a spin. So the left elbow can either plug into the arch of that left foot, or if the range is there, the elbow might come down to the earth. Make a fist with the left hand, a mitt with the top palm, and again start to spin around your plumb line. And eventually the vision will travel up and over that right shoulder. If the spin isn't there, you might like to just come down onto both elbows out towards the right, pulling that sternum forward. Let's take your option here and fill up those lungs to flush out the opposite kidney. And bring it back into the center. Hug that left knee in towards the chest. Travel it back behind you. Without thinking about it too much, just tuck the back toe, lift the back leg, maybe coming up onto the fingertips, press into your right ankle, lift the right hip, send it back, downward facing dog. And just reorganize your blanket if it's gone a bit puffy or a bit skewy. And then find the integrity of your dog, plug your lungs into your thighs, look forward as you find the back bend, and then pick up your left foot, thread it through for pigeon, all the way over to the left side of your mat. That's it. And so here, if the right hip, you don't want to have the right hip kind of going up to the ceiling, so keep pulling that left hip back, right hip forward. Maybe placing another blanket underneath that pelvis so that you really find the support that you need. And then again, just find your propping, your scaffolding, and then hinging at your hips, folding down, plugging the armpits in maybe. Or another nice option is to have some blocks underneath your sternum and one block underneath your forehead. So it's like a capital T with the blocks. And then pull those wrists away from your hip bones. Find that tilt of the pubic bone forward, your belly button, your sternum. And find the middle of your circumference as you travel up your plumb line all the way up to the crown of the head. And then if you pop the cork with the breath, you can descend that breath down your circumference like a big arc, big radiant sphere. A nice visual here is to inhale and travel up your plumb line from your perineum up through the middle of your pelvis, through the middle of your torso, up through the center of your throat and your skull, and pause right at the crown of your head. And then as if you're popping a bottle of champagne, you pop the cork after that pause, that pregnant pause, and descend that breath down that radiant sphere, your center to your circumference. And just count yourself 3 to 5 breaths here. You might find the cross-reference of your left wrist to your right hip bone and your right wrist to your left hip bone, and pull those 4 points apart. You could subtly rotate your armpits in towards your heart and feel the collarbones pull out to each side so the frame of your lungs opens up a little bit more. So that every inhalation, the breath can fill up the lungs to their full potential. And on every exhalation, they can drain out and empty the lungs completely. Once you've had it with that, start to walk the fingertips up, stack the shoulders for a moment, and then walk the hands out over towards 2 o'clock, out towards the right. So options, you might stay here, or option 2, come down for that twist. Left elbow over towards the right, left shoulder comes down, keep the block in the middle of the mat. Find a twist here as you spin out towards the right. Make a fist with that bottom hand and a mitt with the top palm so that you've got a ball and mitt fit to find the center of your joints. Keep pulling the crown of the head forward. Pubis, your navel, your sternum travels forward and up. Find your back bend. And after the twist, coming up onto the fingertips, walking it over towards the left side. Right elbow comes down, right shoulder, temple towards the block, fist with the right hand and mitt with the top palm. And rather than dumping into your shoulder here, I want you to use the leverage of the fist and the palm to really spin around your plumb line so that left lung feels like it can fill up. Otherwise, we're just dumping into our hips and dumping into our shoulders, and that doesn't allow any of the breath to circulate through the circuitry of your joints. Bring it back into the center. So good, rolling over that left hip, right leg comes forward. And just organize yourself in double pigeon, remove the flesh from your sitting bones. Option to keep that foot out in front, or right ankle comes right on top of that left knee. Try not to dump into your tailbone, instead tilt that pubic bone forward and just start to pump the breath in, out, in, out, in, out. Feel the subtle rise in your pubic bone tilting forward, your belly button and your sternum rise up so the lungs can move forward and your chest, your collarbones can open up the frame so the antenna above you is really pulling up towards the ceiling. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. A big inhale at the top. And then as you exhale, start to spin in the opposite direction. So if you went counterclockwise, go clockwise. If you went clockwise first, start to spin counterclockwise, keeping the integrity of the spine. So a lot of you tend to round the spine like this. We don't want that, so keep the hands above the crown and start to hinge and swivel from your hips rather than your spine. Need 2 more here. And keep the eyes open and look forward so that you're looking out towards your potential, looking out in front of you. Gaining sight of your right and what's over towards the left. Bring it back into the center and release those palms. Grab those blocks. And if you don't have blocks, can always just come onto the fingertips. So even if we're not on the blocks, fingertips come onto the floor and just start to hinge forward. Nice option if you're on your fingertips is to have a block there for your forehead to come down onto. Find the cross-reference of your hips and start to fill up the middle of your pelvis as if you could expand the hip bones out to east and west, the sitting bones, and filling it up so that anything that's in the excess, the drainage of your waters, anything that's kind of stagnant and stuck can start to flush through and find fluency. Option coming up onto the fingertips, I'm going to just spin towards the front. But starting to walk the hands over towards the left, keeping the integrity of that spine, the natural curvature in your upper back. Option 2, find your spin. Maybe the elbow comes into the arc of the foot. Make a fist and a mitt and start to spin. And again, you could come down towards the earth with that elbow, plugging it in and spinning the vision up and over that left shoulder, filling up that left lung. Or if the spin isn't there, you might work to plug your elbows and forearms down into the earth. And just take 2 more breaths here and look forward and find that your lungs can still move forward. So good. Bringing it back into the center, walking the hands up, maybe hugging that right knee into the chest and just doing a few rotations and sitting. Well done, guys. Look forward to seeing you.